Welcome to part one of the Infernoid Intensive Guide. Here I'm going to talk about what the monsters are in the Infernoid archetype, which is an entire archetype of fire-type themed monsters. There are three major types of Infernoids, and one of those has multiple different types. So first we have our one extra deck monster. We have 10 different inherent special summons. It says level 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we talk about those all separately. And in addition to that, their best monster is this here level 1 normal summonable tuner monster. So I'm going to go through them all in order so that everyone knows how to play this deck and play against this deck. You do both. All right, so this is Infernoid Decatron. He can be normal summoned or special summoned. His effect is when he is normal summoned or special summoned, it's a trigger effect, you can send one other Infernoid, any of these 10, from your main deck to the graveyard, and it has three effects. First, it gains the level of the Infernoid. So if you send this one, he'll be level 2, level 3, level 4, and so on, depending on the level of the monster you send. Secondly, he'll gain the name of that monster. So his name is Decatron here, but if we send Prometheus, his name will be Prometheus. Additionally, if you send a monster, he'll gain its effect. So if we were to send Harmadic, he'll become level 4, so he'll be 3 + 1. His name will be Harmadic, and his effect will be target one monster on the field, destroy it, and during your opponent's turn, tribute a monster, banish a card from the graveyard. So he does a lot of things, and the reason the level modulation is so cool is because he's actually a tuner, which means you can make him level 4 for rank 4s, you can make him level 4 for certain synchros, and so on. So he's pretty open to do whatever you need to. And certain monsters have different effects. Some are effect negation, some are spot removal, and some of them are actually battle reactive cards. So we're going to run through the different monsters in the main deck of Infernoids now. And keep in mind, until you know what any of these guys do, the real power of this monster isn't exactly clear.
One last thing, if the effect of Infernoid Decatron would be negated after it's successfully resolved, if his effect would be negated by a card like Breakthrough Skill or Forbidden Chalice, he will still maintain the name of the monster sent, the effect, and the level gain, because that effect is not continuous. Negating him after he's successfully resolved his trigger effect will not stop that. It's a lingering effect. You can't stop a lingering effect once it's already resolved. So that's something you may have to argue with people live, but that is the way it works. He will keep all of those stats. So let's take a look at the other monsters.
All right, so first up of the inherent special summons, which there are 10, there are 3 tiers of them. We have the babies, levels 1 through 4, which we're going to talk about first. Then there's the Demi bosses, which is levels 5 through 8. And then the boss monsters, which are levels 9 and 10, we'll talk about last. And they have the boss monsters have stuff in common with the demi bosses, but the demi bosses all have something in common, and the babies all have something in common. So I'm going to talk about the babies first. So first up, Infernoid babies, levels 1 through 4. They have 2 things in common, so we'll talk about those first. They're all inherent special summons, and you can tell because on the card it says this card can be special summoned, and then it says where it can be special summoned from in parentheses. Now, in parentheses means that this is not an effect, unlike something like Mermelibus Megalo, where he has an effect that would summon him by discarding 2 water monsters. That's not in parentheses, it's an effect, and that's based on problem-solving card text, which you can look up on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Wiki. Anyway, so here are the things that these guys have in common. They can all be summoned from the hand, only from the hand, by banishing an Infernoid monster, either from your graveyard or your hand, just one. So all of these can be summoned by banishing one Infernoid monster. So they're like a mini dragon ruler. Now, in addition to that, they all have the same quick effect, which can be used on your opponent's turn. And that is, you contribute a monster as cost to target one card in the graveyard and banish it. So if they have a Decatron in their graveyard, perhaps, I can use any one of these 4 guys, tribute a monster. It doesn't have to be itself, so I can activate his effect and tribute this to target this card in the graveyard and banish it. That is quick play, so you can use it at any time that's important. And with certain void support, I actually tend to tribute this a lot, because there's cards that add this back to your hand. All right, so they can all be summoned from the hand. You contribute them to banish a card in the graveyard. Now, something that all the Infernoids have in common is that they can only be summoned if the total level of Infernoids, not the total level of Infernoids, they can only be summoned if the total level of effect monsters, level and rank, is 8 or lower. So if we have these on the field, we can't summon any Infernoids because we have a total level of 9. But if we have this on the field, we can summon more Infernoids, any of them, the big one, the other little one, and so on. The only one you can summon at all times is Decatron, because he just doesn't include that in his effect, because his effect is determined by what he sends. So if you can always summon Decatron. All right, so back to what these guys actually do. So going in order, level 1, Infernoid Permeus. His effect is my favorite of the little ones. His effect is you can target any set card on the field once per turn during your main phase, and that card gets shuffled back into the deck. And just like Night Beam, that card cannot respond to the activation of this effect. So it is important that you offer your opponent the chance to respond when you summon this monster, or when Decatron resolves becoming this monster, because at that point, if they say no, all of their cards are in danger of being sent back to the deck. Now, I said set cards. Now that includes monsters and spells and trap cards. So that's actually a pretty wide array of cards. Now I use this a lot to deal with Pillars of the Yang Zing, 9 pillars, because pretty much pillars negates everything, but this card gets around it. It's kind of like a Night Beam for the deck. I actually main deck 1 and side deck 2 of these, so I'm not going to go into my deck at the moment, but I do use it specifically to deal with cards that you normally wouldn't be able to deal with. He has no attack and no defense. Both of the effects for these cards can be used once per turn. So the spot removal effect, which they all have a spot removal effect, and the tribute to banish from graveyard can only be used once per turn. All right. So now let's talk about the next one. So that's Permeus. Oh, also because he has 0 attack, he can attack the turn he uses this effect. It's printed on the card. It does not say he can't, but the 2 bigger ones here can't because the card says they can't. So if you use Decatron with this, you can still attack for 5. All right. Next up is Infernoid Antra. Now Antra is level 2, so you can make Decatron level 3. He has 0 attack, 2000 defense. His spot removal effect is to target 1 face-up card on the field and return it to the hand. So he's particularly good at dealing with extra deck monsters that can't be destroyed, like Crystalline Synchro Dragon or Beals. I'm sure there are other cards that you probably want to use this on just to avoid killing them. Also, it's good for Floodgates if you actually run out of the Spell and Trap Destroyer. So you can actually bounce a Floodgate for the turn if you can kill your opponent. So let's, he can only target your own cards, which all the other ones can target either player's cards. You can target either player's set cards with Permeus, and the other monsters. So this one only doesn't do your own cards. So you can't bounce a card and then put it back down again like a giant Trinade or anything. All right, now, Harmodic, level 3. His effect is that he can target 1 monster on the field and destroy it. So that's really good. You can target one of your opponent's monsters and destroy it, or if you're level locked by the Infernoid level limit, so your levels are over 8 at the moment, maybe you want to kill one of your own monsters so you can summon more, which I use a lot. All right, so he has 1600 attack and 0 defense. Petrula has 1800 attack and 0 defense, level 4. Petrula is the spell and trap destroyer. Target 1 spell or trap card on the field and destroy it. Now, just like you might want to unlevel lock yourself with Harmodic, you might want to use Petrula to destroy certain cards that you might control, maybe a Floodgate, or there's a spell card that makes Infernoids do half damage but lets you summon more. It's called Void Imagination. We'll talk about support cards later on, but you may want to actually destroy that with him, or make Decatron into him and destroy it. So those are some options for the babies. All right, and that's going to bring us into the Demi bosses. All right. So levels 5, 6, 7, and 8. All right, so these are the Demi bosses. Now they're similar to the babies in that you can summon them by banishing Infernoids from your hand or graveyard, but there is a big difference. They can be summoned from your hand or graveyard. So on the card, in parentheses, it says hand/graveyard. Where does it say hand or graveyard? These can all be summoned by banishing 2 Infernoids, so a combination of from your hand or graveyard. So you can do 1 from your hand and 1 from your graveyard to summon it from your hand or your graveyard, which is pretty good. So that's a big difference between them. Now, they all share a common effect. very similar to the babies. During either player's turn, once per turn, you contribute one monster you control, not necessarily itself, and banish one card in your opponent's graveyard. So you can use this to tribute itself and banish a card in your graveyard, in their graveyard, or you can use his effect to tribute this one and banish a card from your graveyard. Now, there's not a lot of reason to use them to tribute a different monster, because every time, if you have all 4 of these out, which shouldn't happen because the level lock, but if you do, you have 4 banishes if you keep tributing themselves. But if you tribute each other, you actually run out of banishes. So if I use this to tribute this, and then this to tribute that, now I have no banishes left. So it's not really optimal to use the other monsters for cost. So you should generally use themselves.
Now, this does change from time to time when you actually have certain monsters you need to keep on the board, but they don't necessarily have a banish from graveyard effect. So there are scenarios where you would tribute the other monster, or it's your opponent's monster. Maybe you got Kaiju. So this isn't set in stone. There's always a possibility that you may want to actually tribute something other than itself.
Now, all of these have something in common. Just like all the babies were spot removal cards, all of these have effects that activate in the battle phase. All right, so this is Piatti, level 5, my personal favorite of these. He has 2200 attack and 0 defense. His effect is when he inflicts battle damage by attacking an opponent's monster, they send 1 card in their hand at random to the graveyard. So it doesn't count as a discard, so it won't activate like a Dark World monster. It does mean that if you can't send cards to the graveyard for some reason, it won't work. But generally, you go into this guy for a couple of reasons. One, Decatron becomes level 6, which is useful for some Exceed plays. I use Utopia Beyond, which is pretty cool. Also, it allows you to do some cool OTKs using certain extra deck monsters, specifically extra deck vanilla monsters like Scrap Archfiend and Gaia Force of Earth. And by using him, you can use this and a Decatron and make those pretty easily, because most of the plays that you use the Decatron for those OTKs involve having one of the babies in hand also, which you might not. So this allows you to get around that. So this one and this one tend to allow those OTKs. But yeah, if you can't kill your opponent, taking a card out of their hand seems like the best thing you can do with your time there. Let's take a look at the level 6. So level 6 we have is Sajet, who has become more popular because of the release of a new Void Trap. It's a Void Feast, which lets you summon 3 Infernoids whose total level are 8 from your deck. So he's 6, so you do him and 2 Decatrons. But I don't want to talk about the support at the moment, but I do want to talk about his effect. All right, so his effect, by the way, triggers in the damage step because it's after the monster's after damage is inflicted. His effect triggers when he declares an attack. His effect says your opponent banishes 1 card from their extra deck, their choice. So that is a pretty crappy effect. They just choose the least useful monster in their extra deck. Now, believe it or not, your opponent will generally be an idiot. Now, your benefit is of them being an idiot is they will banish a card they might actually need, or they might not think they need. So this is surprisingly useful for winning a game. Now, the other thing that's interesting is its effect activates every time it declares an attack. So if for some reason your opponent's monster count changes, a replay will trigger, and you can redeclare an attack with this card, which means you can re-banish a card from their hand. From their extra deck. And sometimes what I like to do is I like to take Decatron and summon him and make him into this guy. So he goes to the graveyard, then banish 2 Infernoids and summon this guy, and declare an attack with both of them. And that'll get 2 cards from their extra deck. Which is why if you ever play anybody online, if you're an online player or enjoy doing that, every time someone has a short extra deck, which is a really silly thing to do, there's really very little reason to have a small extra deck, but you can actually get rid of almost their entire extra deck with just this card. All right, so this happens live a lot when you play like Klee Demise. Your opponent will just not run an extra deck because they don't intend on using it, but if the only card in their extra deck is their Scout or their Monolith, you can get rid of it. So yeah, that's going to wrap up the discussion of Sajet. So he's pretty cool. Next is everyone's favorite, Infernoid Seitzmas. He has 2600 attack, 0 defense. This was 24. I'm sure you can just look up the cards if you want the stats. 20, 22, 24, 26. And they all have 0 defense. All right, so he's level 7. So his effect is you can, at the end of the battle phase, if this card battled a monster, you can banish 1 card on the field. and that does not say target, so you can banish anything that's affected by your card effects. So this is a card that you used to need to get over like Cosmo Dark Destroyer. You would have to attack into a different monster, and you don't even need to destroy the monster you attack, you just need to have battled. So if it battles a monster, and as long as he doesn't die, at the end of the battle phase, he can banish a card on the field. So you can banish Cosmo Town to avoid destroying it, or Cosmo Dark Destroyer. There's a whole bunch of cards you might want to banish. And since you don't have to tell your opponent what it is, they tend to get forced into playing a bunch of cards early, which was the other reason I like Infernoid Prometheus. Your opponent kind of becomes forced to activate a bunch of cards before knowing what's going to happen. Now, he needs to live, so certain things you can do to combo with this card is use Stardust Spark Dragon to make him so he can't die in battle. That way he can attack a monster who he would normally die attacking, which is one of the ways I used to get over Cosmo Dark Destroyer. Make it so he can't die, and then crash, and then banish the card. I also used to play Save Zone. There's also a new card called Dimensional Guardian, I think, which you can do something similar with. It's like Save Zone, but you can inflict damage. Alright, so that's him. And the last one, which he's probably the best one, it's dependent on the format. He's got 2800 attack and 0 defense. His effect is, if he destroys a monster in battle and sends it to the graveyard, which is when the effect will trigger, you can attack again in a row. So if you attack with him, you have to attack with him again to get the extra attack. So if you attack with him and then attack with this, now he can't attack again. So you do need to do them in a row. Now it doesn't work so well against pendulum formats because then their monster, you won't be able to send it to the graveyard. Same thing is happening a lot in Monarch format, where you'd attack Prime Monarch. It would become a trap in the graveyard, which is where it triggers, so it wouldn't be a monster, so he wouldn't attack again. So if you're playing live, you could cheat and claim that it works and no one would really question it, but online it didn't work, and it shouldn't work, and just so you know. If you're playing against an Infernoid player, if they kill your trap card and don't send it to the graveyard, then they can't attack again. Alright, so that's going to wrap up the discussion of the Demi bosses. Alright, now we have the last two main deck Infernoid monsters. The boss monsters, Infernoid Deviati and Infernoid Anunku. Now, they're similar to the Demi bosses, that they can be summoned from the hand or the graveyard. So if you get them in the graveyard, you can summon them. You get them in your hand, you can still summon them. These you tend to want to stay in your deck to summon the big fusion monster, which we're also going to talk about in a minute, because they're part of the fusion material, and he's summoned with a spell card that's like Shadal Fusion, so you can summon using cards from your deck, because his material is just like impossible to do if you had to do it with polymerization. That'd be crazy. Alright, so let's talk about the boss monsters. You can summon them from your hand or graveyard by banishing 3 Infernoids from your hand or graveyard. Now, I didn't mention that when I was talking about the Demi bosses, but that's a combination of, it's not like you need to do 3 from graveyard or 3 from hand. You can do 1 from one place and 2 from another, and so on. Now, because they're level 9 and 10, they level lock you instantly. So once you're at level 9, you can't summon Infernoids. You can still normal summon Decatron, though, or the fusion monster, or something else. Alright, now, when Deviati is summoned, it destroys all spell. You can activate the effect, it's optional. Destroy all spell and trap cards on the field except for void cards. Now, in the Infernoid deck, void cards are the archetype support, so that's actually really good, and it's actually the reason I play the deck. And I actually play the pure build with all the void support, so my cards don't die and my opponents do. Now, if you're playing an Infernoid mirror match, do know that if your set cards are void cards, or your face-up cards are void cards, you can flip them face-up, and then their Deviati won't destroy them, which is pretty cool, and has come up in my mirror matches. Now, Infernoid Anunku requires you to banish 3 cards as well, and his effect is when he's summoned, you destroy all monsters on the field. Now, unlike Deviati, who doesn't destroy void cards, Infernoid Anunku doesn't have any kind of everything except anything clause, so he destroys all of your cards, and your opponent's cards. So he's Dark Hole, this is Heavy Storm, sometimes Harpies. Now, they have a similar tribute effect, just like the other ones do. I may have forgotten to mention, all of those banish effects from Graveyard are once per turn, so you can use this once on your turn and once on your opponent's turn. Same thing for these. Now their effects are different. So Deviati destroys all spell and trap cards, but what it does is when a monster effect would be activated, you can tribute a monster on your field to negate the activation, and banish the card. Now that's monster effect is activated. And because you can do this to your own cards, sometimes you might want to get yourself out of level lock. Like sometimes when I summon this thing, you put Omega in graveyard, so you can use Omega to use this just to get this off field so you can summon other guys. So yeah, again, you usually use itself so you can unlevel lock yourself and leave your other monster effects alive. But you know, it's hard to summon these big guys, so it's a little bit, you got to be more careful. All right, so Anoku. His effect is similar to Deviati's, so he destroys all monsters, but his effect is during either player's turn, once per turn, you can tribute a monster on your field to negate the activation or the effect of a spell or trap card and banish that card. So you can negate Cosmo Town when it's played face up, or you can negate it when it's activated to add a card from their banished zone back to the hand. So it works kind of like Cyber Dragon Infinity, that it can get cards that are placed face up and cards that are activating their effects. Unlike something like Totally Awesome, which does not cannot negate a card in the graveyard or a card that triggers that's already face up. So he's a little better than those in that sense, but he's, you know, tributing a monster is kind of a tough thing to do. Now, if you're being level locked by Anoku and you want to activate a card to get him off the field, a trick I've used is you can breakthrough skill your opponent's monster before he destroys it. So you can go summon Anoku, activate effect to destroy all cards on the field. Then you can say chain breakthrough skill from graveyard, targeting their monster before it dies. Then tribute Anoku to negate the breakthrough skill. So breakthrough skill will get negated, all monsters on the field will be destroyed, and then you can summon all of your Infernoids and kill your opponent. So that's a pretty neat little trick. That's something you can do with him. And the last monster is from the extra deck. That's Infernoid Tiara, which is summoned by using Void Imagination, which is essentially a Shadal fusion. And if you don't know what Shadal fusion is, essentially it lets you, if your opponent controls a monster from the extra deck, you can use the materials to summon this card from your main deck. So it requires 3. So 1 Anoku, 1 Deviati, and any other Infernoid. It says 1 Anoku, 1 Deviati, and any other number of Infernoids. So it could be 1 to whatever. If you play Future Fusion, you can actually, if you have these still in your deck, you can send every Infernoid from your deck to the graveyard, which is pretty brutal. Because filling the graveyard is how you make this deck work. So milling cards are a benefit to this. So Light Swarms and other stuff. We'll talk about that later. So Tiara is level 11, so it level locks you. And it only has an on-field effect, and it doesn't have a way to tribute itself off. So you can't really clear him out yourself. There are a few ways to deal with that, and I'm not going to discuss them all now. I'm just going to tell you what this card does. First, you fusion summon it using this, probably not polymerization. So it's a continuous card, so you have to play it to the field, and then you trigger its effect on field, and then it sends itself to the graveyard as cost. Then you send the Infernoids from the deck to the graveyard, and then you summon this monster. Now, depending on the number of Infernoids used, he will have different effects, and you can activate either them all or none. So it's not like I'll pick and choose what I use. So if you send 3 Infernoids, you can send 3 cards from the extra deck to the graveyard. Now, there are a couple of fun things you can do with that. You can send Cyframe Omega, which messes with your opponent's graveyard. You can send an additional copy of Infernoid Tiara, which is good for getting additional banish fodder for future Infernoids. And a new card that's coming out soon, Elder Entity Natess, says when this card is sent to the graveyard, destroy 1 card on the field. So you can use Natess to destroy. You can send 3 copies of Natess and nuke your opponent's entire board, or destroy himself because he does level lock you. So you might want to kill him. Another way to kill him is you can actually respond to his effect with a Ghost Ogre and Ghost Ogre your Tiara, so that you can summon more Infernoids. In Link format, it's actually going to be pretty easy to just use this and make a Link monster. And Link monsters don't have levels or ranks, so they don't actually level lock you. So that's another good thing about him. So yeah, so his first effect, send 3 cards. That's if you use 3 Infernoids. His second effect includes, the other problem with using that effect is your opponent might be playing something like Burning Abyss, in which case they can send Dantes and then just use the Dantes to target each other and put themselves back in the extra deck, so it becomes a silly effect. They can also use Totally Awesome and then add water monsters back to their hand. Or sometimes they use Gamma Seal, the water kaiju, and they add that to their hand. in the graveyard. You can do that too. You can play totally awesome and pick up your own kaiju if you want. The second effect is both players mill 3 cards, so if you use 5 or more. So you'd send 6, so it's possible to do 5. It's also possible to intentionally not do 5 by, like, it says different names, so 5 different names. So I could do Anoku, Deviati, and then Decatron, Decatron, Decatron. Which one reason to do Decatron, Decatron, Decatron is that Decatron has 200 defense, and it's a fire monster. So you can rekindling all 3 copies. So that's one way to prevent going to the 5/1. Maybe you don't want to mill cards in your opponent's deck because they're playing Burning Abyss or Shaddoll or something. But you can also intentionally put Decatrons in grave or other Infernoids in grave you want in grave. His last 2 effects require you to have some Infernoids in hand when you summon. So let's say I have this and this in hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can do the fusion, send these 6 from deck, these 2 from my hand, and reach 8. And you can do the same thing to get the 10 monsters. If you want 10, because this only does 6. The 8 monster effect is to both players choose 3 cards in their advantage zone and return them to the graveyard. And its 10 monster effect is both players discard their hands. So if you send 10, the effects, you'll either have to activate them all or activate none. So it'll go send 3 cards from the action deck to the graveyard, send 3 cards from the top of the deck to the graveyard, unbanish 3 cards, and then both players discard their hands, which is decent for you because your cards are good in the graveyard and theirs aren't. And since you play this on your turn, you can always set all of your back row before you do this. So we'll talk more about combos and support and other things in the next video. Please make sure that you put a vote on the poll if you like this video more or the animated one. And I'll see you guys in the next video on support, which will either be like this or it'll be animated. This was a little easier to do. The animations took more work, but I don't know. I was able to script out the animations more. This is more like one take. I know I did little clips, but I'll see you guys next time.